Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I have the pleasure of simplifying the marketing and the mindset so you, the chiropractor, can increase your income, your impact, and your enjoyment in practice too. In today's episode, the theme of it is going to be all around conversion. How can we have more patients taking on care without having to bully them or scare them? Now, there's going to be several things that we will talk about through this, but the big idea I want you to understand is the key to objection management, the key to solving problems is first of all knowing what the problem actually is. Once the problem has been identified, it's said that very often the solution becomes self-evident. Now, there are several reasons why patients might not start care. Now, when I think about conversion, I'm going to kind of define this for you. If your PVA, your patient visit average, is kind of less than 15, you have a conversion problem, not a retention problem, okay? So it means the issue has got to do with your new patient visit, your report of findings, and those first few adjustments. If your retention is 20 and you want to get it to 40, it's not so much about what you're doing in the initial consultation, the report of findings. It is more about the daily interactions. It's also more about your re-exams and your re-reviews. Now, we tend to often over-exaggerate the importance of the new patient visit and the report of findings when it comes to long-term retention. And that's the equivalent of saying that the first date is the most important thing in a marriage. It's absolutely not, but we have to have the first date. So you've probably heard me say before, in golf, there's a saying, golf goes over 4 days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And it says that you can't win the Masters, the big tournament, on a Thursday and Friday, but you can lose it. So you can muck up everything in your practice, your retention, your conversion from your new patient and your report of findings. Big lifetime value and lifetime kind of retention doesn't come from these visits. So particularly if you're struggling to get your practice members to even 12 visits a week, then what I'm going to be talking about today is going to be helpful for you, okay? We're going to be quite 40,000 foot view in amongst this as well. I'm going to introduce you to a guy who is a management guru. We're going to get into some kind of pretty heavy topics in this, a guy by the name of Eli Goldratt. Now, that's Eliyahu. That's how you actually say his name. We did check out that as well. Now, he's an Israeli guy, an incredibly intelligent guy. He's a physicist, an educator, an author. But what he's best known for is being a business management guru. And he developed a theory called the theory of constraints. This was a methodology for identifying the most significant limiting factor, the constraint that stands in the way of businesses achieving their goals. And so he would go into big corporations, big companies that wanted to change, a corporate takeover, they wanted to implement a new system, but couldn't do it. And he'd work out what is it that stands in the way, and he had a system in around that. Now, part of this theory of constraints is a thing that he talks about as layers of resistance. And he says there are 6 layers of resistance that even when they work it all out, that gets in the way of people implementing change. Now, these 6 layers of resistance are the same 6 layers that get in the way of us having people convert into care, okay? So them taking on care and at least getting to the first re-exam as well. So in this episode here, I'm going to talk you through, I'm going to give you an overview of these 6 layers of resistance, and we're going to do a deeper dive into the first one because this is the one that tends to have the biggest impact on a chiropractic practice. So let's again, let me summarize a little bit of what we're going to be talking about. If we're going to improve the conversion of our practice members and do it in a way that's ethical, where we're not being pushy or trying to bully people or scare them into care, we've got to understand what are the reasons why they might not be taking it on. The solutions depend very much on knowing what the problem is. This is not a, one solution fits across the whole thing. And often as chiropractors, probably myself as well, I've been, I'm tempted to want to give you a one-size-fits-all approach, but it's not how it works. It doesn't work with chiropractic. It's not one adjustment that helps people. It's not the same adjustment for the same problem. We need to assess the situation, find out what the problem is, correct it. Okay, so let's talk through these 6 layers of resistance again, and then we'll do a deeper dive into it. So the layer 1 is disagreement around the problem. Now, this is the most common layer of resistance in the chiropractic field, or for most chiropractic practices, particularly for those practices that are really having a hard time getting people at least through to visit 12, their first re-exam as well. And in essence, what this is the problem you're solving is not the same problem that the practice member wants solved, okay? They think they're coming in because they've got a back problem that started yesterday or last week, and you in your mind are trying to solve a lifetime full of subluxation, okay? And so there is a disconnect between the solution you're offering and the problem that they want to have solved as well. Now, I'm going to talk to you in a moment how we go about solving that as well. The second layer is a disagreement in around the solution. So we agree on what the problem is as well, but they disagree on the solution. The solution doesn't make sense for them. So they're like, okay, I understand that I've had this problem for a long time, but why can't you just crack my back and put it back in again? So we have to give them the right information so they can make sense of why correction takes time, why it takes the support of lifestyle changes, why there needs to be repetition of the adjustments. And if we have good educational processes on this that begin on the initial consultation and run the way through, then the solution for people becomes a lot more self-evident, okay? But if you're talking about the adjustments and why there needs to be repetition of those and why they build upon another and why the whole lifestyle thing goes along with it, but you have a disagreement around what the problem is, then you're solving the wrong problem, okay? Layer number 3 is a lack of confidence in the solution. Now, this is, again, so somebody agrees what the problem is, and then they also agree what your solution is, but this is a personal thing. So in this situation here, the patient doubts their ability to be able to get the results. So I might agree that, okay, if I go on this weight training program through here, if I eat this food, then I could end up standing up on a stage and doing one of those muscle-bound contests, okay? And I might believe that that could work for other people, but I don't believe it works for me, okay? So this, now also, the other factor in this too, or the person doesn't believe that you can deliver it. This is a lack of trust that they have in you. It's like, okay, yep, I agree that's what my problem is, and I agree that I need a whole bunch of chiropractic care to get me there too, but inherently, I don't trust you. And if we don't have trust between our practice members, the ingredient that solves pretty much all of these layers, let me interject into this, is trust, okay? So that's what we need to be building in the initial consultation, all right? But let's continue on there too. Layer 4 is fear of potential negative effects. So these are concerns around the negative side effects that the change might bring. Now, particularly, negative side effects might be, they're worried about stroke, they're worried about getting sore, they're worried this might impact on other areas of their life, but also it could be they're worried about the amount of time that it's going to take them, okay? The negative impact in terms of how am I going to get the kids to school, how am I going to pick them up from school, how am I going to administrate my life as well, okay? Layer 5 here is overcoming obstacles. So in this situation, the practice member has bought into what the problem is. They've bought into the solution. They know that you're the solution for this. There's no stress about there being any side effects. But there are often some other obstacles along the way. Now, these obstacles just tend to be administrative, okay? It's like, how am I going to just make this happen? All right, I know I need this. The problem sounds exactly like what I want solved, but often there's some administration in around that too. And so, again, these problems here, when it's an administrative problem, maybe we have to talk to people about payment plans. We have to talk to them about what hours we're open. We have to give them strategies to make it easier for them to get there. And if you're going back at this stage here and communicating, do you understand how serious the problem is? This is why we have to see you twice a week for the next 6 weeks. You're solving the wrong problem. It's an administrative problem. And when we solve the wrong problem, what we actually do is we turn people away. All right? And then the final layer here as well is called psychological. Now, this is dealing with issues in around self-worth, identity, and other things it's just basically dealing with behavior change. And interesting, Goldratt says that this is probably the biggest barrier that stops people making change is an identity that they lose to have to make a behavior change. Now, I think this certainly impacts us as chiropractors, particularly those people that have had chronic pain for a long time. And often if you've had chronic pain for a long time, there are support mechanisms in around that. There are benefits for people having pain. They might get more love and attention from their peers, from their loved one. Maybe they don't have to go to work. We've all dealt with those insurance people that are on work cover or motor vehicle accidents as well, where it's in part of their brain, it's in their best interests not to change because they've got an insurance payment that's coming into them every week. So let me review those 6 layers again. And as I'm going through those, I want you to think about, maybe a practice member that you feel like is kind of checking out at the moment or one that has checked out, and start to think about where was the layer of resistance with them? Where did you perhaps miss it? Where was there not agreement? The first one is disagreement around the problem. Were you trying to solve a different problem than what the patient came into you for as well? The second one is disagreement in around the solution. You agreed on what the problem was. You did a great job of showing them that, their x-rays, their reviews, their scans, their posture. Did all of that on the initial consultation, yet the solution just didn't make sense for them. Was there a lack of confidence in the solution? That is, lack of their confidence to be able to pull it off. Couldn't see themselves being able to get there for the adjustments, didn't believe they had it in them to work towards this over the next 12 months as well. Was there a fear of potential negative effects there? Side effects. Were they worried about that? What questions could you have asked Could you see that there was some form of, anxiety when you started to talk about it that you perhaps didn't address as well? Were there some obstacles that just, couldn't be overcome? In my time in practice towards the end there, I worked 3 days. I worked Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. They were the 3 days. And so they were the only 3 days that you came in. Now, I had to realize that there were some patients that just couldn't do that. It's like, Angus, you want to have me here twice a week, and I can't get here because I'd work long on those days or whatever it was. So there's some obstacles that I just couldn't overcome. And if I was there 7 days, then, would I have been able to see more people? Yes. Would I have gone stark raving mad? Yes. We have to understand that these sort of obstacles, even though they're administrative, are very, very real. And then the final one, is there is there issues in around behavior change? Now, in my experience, 27 years of experience there, I believe the biggest barrier that I see, and I certainly see this with our new grads that come and work with us and our associates as well, is in around layer one. There's a disagreement on the problem that we both think we're solving. And so you're aware of this. Somebody comes in and even, they have some form of musculoskeletal issue, or our practice sees lots of kids. And so, if we've got a bub that's coming in that might only be 8 or 10 weeks old and is colicky at that stage, so they've only been alive for 8 weeks. And if we're telling them this is going to take a few months to settle, it's like, hang on, how is it going to take so long? How has my child's spine been? They just don't understand. There's a disconnect between the problem and the solution from here. In fact, in essence, we're trying to provide a solution to a much bigger problem than what the patient thinks as well. So these patients don't start care because the recommendation don't match the problem that they think they're trying to solve as well, okay? So they often think that the problem started yesterday when they were getting the groceries out of the car, yet they don't understand that subluxation is something that for many of us in this modern day lifestyle begins at birth, or in most cases, it certainly has decades, if not years of head start as well. So how do we go about solving for this problem as well? So the mistakes that most chiropractors make with this is the way they try and solve for this problem is they try and scare the pants and they use fear tactics to try and get them to understand the seriousness of subluxation and the damage that's in their spine as well. Now, the key factor here is intent is what matters. Now, if you've done any study in around the consequences of subluxation, the consequences of a spine not working right, and even if we look from a very musculoskeletal point of view, the impact that back pain has on people, the truth is enough. We definitely don't need to scare people. And this took time for me to kind of realize as well. I had a wonderful patient I looked after for a long time who was a hostess, so an airline hostess. And she came in to see me because she'd had years of raging sciatica. And in the process of this sciatica slowly but making her life work, but surely making her life worse, she ended up having to stop work. So she wasn't working when she came in to start getting adjusted with me. She started getting adjusted, her life got better, her sciatica went away, and she went back to work. Now, this particular hostess used to work for Qantas, and at that stage I was flying a lot. And whenever I would get on a plane, she would say, "Who are you flying with?" And I'd say, "I'm flying with Qantas because I like to fly with Qantas." She said, "Let me know what your flight is and I will make sure that you're looked after." And then what this would look like is I would get on the plane and they would kind of check my ticket and they would go, Dr. Pyke, this is the man that saved, I won't tell my patient's name, we'll call her Wendy. This is the man that saved Wendy's life. And I would kind of smile and feel a little bit awkward of it. And I'd get upgraded, or if I didn't get upgraded, as soon as I'd sit down, they'd bring me a glass of champagne. I got really well looked after. And this went on for years. In the back of my mind, I'm like, I didn't save Sue's life. I helped her with her sciatica until I stopped and realized, and further conversations with Sue as well, is the fact that Sue's sciatica stopped her from working. The most important thing in her life was her work. It was her sanity. It was her freedom. She loved her work. She flew all over the world there too. And the sciatica stopped her from being able to do that, and stopped her being able to do that for years. She thought she would never go back to it. The fact that she started to get adjusted and go back to work again there too, she felt like I had saved her life. And I had, to some extent. Now, I always find it fascinating that us as chiropractors see some problems as kind of sexier than others. Like, if we help a patient with their depression, that's much more important than helping a patient with their sciatica. If we help a patient with their asthma, it's much more important than helping somebody with their carpal tunnel. The fact of the matter is, if we help people and we let them live the lives that they want to live, it's important for them. Now, so going back into this too, what chiropractors tend to do though is the intent behind is I want you to understand how serious this is. So I'm going to use fearful words and I'm going to be coercive in my nature and I'm going to be manipulative. Ironic that we're manipulative in this scenario here as well. So what I'm not suggesting is that subluxation isn't serious, and I'm not suggesting that the impact we have is not life-changing, but it is. But our intent here is to educate people, is to have them understand what's going on and give them the consequences. Because the opposite can happen too, and I often see this in new grads, is that we try and play it down. Oh, it's no big deal. It's just a little bit of degeneration. No, there's just a little bit of a curve in your neck. And we use minimizing words here that don't allow the practice members to want to understand or to get an understanding of the seriousness of it as well. So gang, you do not need to scare people. The truth is enough. And if you haven't done a deep dive into the science recently, then you should spend some time doing that. I love what Heidi Havik brings to the world. I love what Dan Murphy brings to the world. James Chestnut is a hero and a mentor of mine. These are people out there. There's plenty of people out there that will help you to educate you on the science of what's going on. So let's talk about how do we go through having somebody so we actually end up with on the same page with what problem we're trying to solve and what problem they came in with. All of this pretty much is done in the initial consultation. And there are three things, along with doing, making sure that you're safe and asking the right questions. There's three things that I want to establish from the history that will help you join the dots for your patients so they understand that this is not something that happened yesterday. There's a lifetime of stress that's built up on this spine. The first one is they need to understand the chronicity. Understanding the timeline helps to illustrate the persistence and therefore possibly the progressive future as well. This can be really eye-opening for practice members. So typically, someone will come in with some kind of musculoskeletal issue and they'll have on their form, this started 2 weeks ago when I was lifting some groceries out of the car. Now, to understand or to start to inquire about the chronicity of the problem, you could just ask a question like, have you ever had a back problem before? And most people will say, well, yes. And you'd say, when did you first experience a back pain? And most people are going to go back decades. And then when was the time before that? And when was the time after that? Now, my experience is in probably 8 out of 10 people, you've very quickly found half a dozen different times in their life that they have had problems similar to this. And they haven't joined the dots of them. One of the things I realized last time I spent some time with James Chestnut is the movement in the field of study in around, particularly around musculoskeletal issues, is that now the researchers don't see this as 6 independent different back pain episodes. They're the one problem that pops up again and again. And the typical kind of journey for this is it will come more frequently, it'll last longer, and the intensity of it will increase. And so this would be something that I would say to my practice members as well. And we would say, look, getting the groceries out of the car 2 weeks ago was probably the straw that broke the camel's back. And what the research tells us is that all of those episodes you've had beforehand are not independent, but they've been one building upon the other until finally you do something as innocuous as getting the groceries out of the car and your back goes pop. And sometimes I will say to people, if I'm wanting to inquire in this, I will say something like, do you normally get the groceries out of the car like this? And they'll go, absolutely. Every Saturday when I go to do the shopping, this is exactly what I do. It's like, we need to investigate and find out why this time, what was going on in your life, and we can start to look at our stresses and go through that too. So we want to understand the chronicity of the problem, and we want to link all of these episodes together. It's not random isolated episodes, but the research, and I've been saying this, my inclination was they were all linked. Now the research would absolutely, affirm that as well, is to let them know the typical history of this is that these episodes are going to become more frequent and they're going to become more intense to deal with as well. So it makes sense that you and I here today is that we not just cover this up like we might have in the past, but let's get to the root cause of this so we don't have to have another episode. Does that make sense? That would be almost the exact language I would say to somebody. The next thing that I want to do in the history is I want to explore the impact of the problem, and that is the emotional and functional impact of the problem. So, I was talking to community influencer members about this the other day, and he was sharing about a practice member who was having some difficulty just bending down, tying up his shoes and putting his own shoes on. And the emotional impact of that was just how emasculating it was for him, not even be able to put on his own shoes there. We need to have our practice members see the impact of what's going on, see what's at stake if this is not corrected. And it's not just the pain itself, it's the emotional side of the pain. And we want to ask, how is this impacting your work? How is this impacting your family? How's this impacting your key relationships? How's this impacting your recreation? And usually we can find the impact in one of those categories from there, okay? So we want to dive into this. Now, very often, people can draw blanks on this in the initial consultation. And sometimes I don't find the true impact of this until visit 3, 4, or 5, because I might not have the confidence to say to somebody I've just met, to be honest, not putting on my shoes makes me feel like less of a man. So, if I don't feel comfortable to say that, I'm not going to be able to, so understand that sometimes it can take time to really find out what the impact of the problem is. But at the very least, ask those questions. How's this impacting your work? How's this impacting your family life? If they're a family person, what about your key relationships there too? Your hobbies? Another one to think about there is sleep. And the third thing I want to get some real clarity in around as well from the initial consultation is I want to understand the patient's goals. What do you want to do when this goes away? Not just tie your shoes up again there too, but what things have you been putting off because of this? What things would you like to be able to do? So discussing the patient's goals starts to lay out a vision for what they want in the future. Now, what we've developed through here is we know what they're trying to move away from. We know the impact of the problem. We now know the chronicity of the problem. And we've got, a carrot out in front of us. So we've got the stick we're trying to move away from and the carrot that we're trying to move towards from. These three things here, I want to make sure that I get great clarity in around all of these from the history as well. Then what it's all about doing is it's about connecting the dots, creating connection through all of this. So use of effective metaphors. I mentioned that beforehand in terms of, the incident that you came in with was probably the straw that broke the camel's back, that we've had these ongoing back problems over the decades beforehand, and it's getting less and less of a trigger for them to actually stimulate them too. The other metaphor that I like to use a lot is to talk about the smoke alarm and the fire. And that very often a lot of healthcare solutions are directed towards the smoke alarm rather than putting out the fire as well. And that when we do that, that's why we have this ongoing recurrence of problems. Every 12 months, your back flares up. It used to just flare up for a couple of days and now it's flaring up for a week. It used to be okay without any medication and now the Nurofen doesn't make any difference. This is what happens when we're constantly putting out the smoke alarm and not actually dealing with the fire underneath. I also had different resources in my practice as well. So we took our own x-rays in-house. And when I was taking the x-rays and somebody was setting up for their lateral cervical, in front of them was a picture of an iceberg. And so that beautiful picture where we get to see, a little bit of the iceberg above the water and a whole bunch underneath there too. And I would explain to them that with the x-rays and the scans we're doing today, we get to find out a lot more about what's happening underneath. And this is important for me because it's going to help us make sure that we can correct the underlying cause of it. So we don't go to, throwing your back out every time that you're putting the groceries back into the car. So again, what we've done through here is we've got metaphors that we've used to help them see that there's more to it than the ongoing presenting symptoms. In the history, I've got some real clarity in around the chronicity. I've got clarity in around the impact and I know what their goals are. And then the third part to do this too is making sure that I'm really good with my examination. So it's important. My experience is that subluxation has a global impact on the body. So if somebody comes in with a neck problem, the major subluxation might be in their neck, but very often it's down in the lower part of the back as well. And they're not even aware of it, that they have subluxations right throughout their body there too. And so in the palpation exam, I want to make sure that I'm not just examining the primary area of concern. We want to look at full spine always. Okay. This is again, not only from a philosophical point of view there too, but from a biomechanical point of view. This is a closed kinematic chain. Okay. You're not going to have dysfunction in one area of the spine and it not affect the other. We understand how this works together. And again, Heidi Havek's work is showing that, when there's disafferentation, when the spine is not moving properly, it changes motor function of the entire spine. So it really reinforces philosophically what we've been saying in chiropractic, which is just find the subluxation and correct it. Doesn't matter whether it's at the area of symptom or not. But I want to build, again, with metaphors, letting people know that, for instance, if I'm starting at their low back, that the lower back here is a bit much like the foundation of the house. If the house's foundation is out of whack, then often we'll see problems further up the spine. And I will palpate through there and I'll show them the tightness and the restriction and I'll show them the ropey. I want them to have an experience that not only is there subluxation and dysfunction in the area of symptoms in their body, but it's elsewhere. And I'm then going to reinforce that with a really good posture exam. Again, I'm going to show them that their entire posture is out of whack. Their entire spine is healed out of position. And I'm going to use more metaphors by saying things like, this is like crooked teeth, okay? And in the same way that we can't just put braces on the teeth for a week and expect them to straighten up, this takes time. So in the initial consultation, I'm starting to lay the foundations of time here. I don't want to just drop the time frame on them, when I get to the report of findings. My good friend Russ Rosen has a story and a metaphor where he talks about it's important that we dip our toe into the water and see, how deep it is. He used to live in a place called Maui, beautiful spot. I got to visit him often there. And Maui is, there's beautiful scattered throughout Maui, these wonderful waterfalls. And what visitors like to do is come to these waterfalls and then they like to jump down off the waterfall into the kind of pond down beneath. Now, sometimes that pond is meters deep and sometimes it's centimeters deep. And every year, a visitor comes into town and jumps off one of those without testing the depth of it, and they hurt themselves and they often die. Now, we need to be doing this and touching base. So in the initial consultation, I'm starting to pre-frame that this is not a problem that's going to solve tomorrow, although we might get some ease in our adjustment after a report of findings there too. This is going to take weeks, sometimes months, and sometimes years. If that's the case, again, this is not me trying to fear or use fear or manipulation. I'm just understanding what it takes for tissue healing and for a spine to get strong and stable again there too. And if there's any concerns at this stage, I want to talk about it then. Okay, so a lot of the pre-framing is done. Now, this is why we like to use the subluxation station and the scans there, because they would often pick up tension patterns away from areas of the spine where the symptoms were. X-rays, the same thing. And so the examination there was about me showing them that they had a spine problem, an entire spine problem, that there are areas of the spine that were not functioning properly that they weren't aware of until I showed them the function of it as well. And so these three things: a good history that quantifies the chronicity, the impact, and then what their goals are. Okay. A really good exam that shows them the global impact of what's going on, particularly in areas where there are no current symptoms there as well. And creating connections through metaphors. There are several metaphors that we've put inside of this as well. And then finally there too, starting to pre-frame on the initial consultation, just starting to throw out some time frames for this as well. These three things start to lay the foundation for when I get into the report of findings, that we can get some clarity in around here's what the problem is. And I'm going to say things like this as well. I know that the symptoms that you had just started a couple of weeks ago when you're getting the groceries out of the car there too. But the problem, Jenny, actually started years before that. Okay. In fact, when you go back to the first time you experienced pain as a teenager, I think that's probably where it began. And then we've had these recurrences of it. And so again, there we're getting clarity in around it. Now, one of the ways, if you've already gone through all of this and you're in the first few visits of your patients there as well, then one of the questions that you might want to chat with them about to help to reconnect and re-clear a lot of this up as well is that perhaps on your next adjustment with them, after you've greeted and you've got some rapport with them, you might want to say something like this: "Hey, Jenny, I'm interested. Can you tell me a little bit about your understanding of what you think is going on with your spine at the moment?" So that kind of question through there, what we want them to say is that, yeah, look, I hurt my back a couple of weeks ago, but it appears I've probably had an ongoing problem that's been happening literally since my teenage years as well. If we can start them to understand something like this, then you're on the same page as well. So my encouragement from today's episode, let's kind of bring all of this together as well, is there are several layers of resistance that stop people from converting into care, okay? The biggest one that tends to affect most chiropractors, particularly if their conversion is poor, is a disagreement or a lack of congruence in around the problem you're trying to solve and the problem that the patient wants solved as well. In order to get on the same page with that, then key from your history is that you get information in around the impact, the chronicity, and also the goals they're going for. Get really good at your examination and making sure that you're allowing them to experience the bigness of what's happening, and start to use a bunch of metaphors that connect all of that along the way. What I want you to do now is start to clean this up with the existing practice members that you have, and you can start to have conversations in around, hey, listen, I'm interested. Tell me a little bit more about what do you understand the problem is that we're actually correcting here? And you'll have some fascinating conversations with that as well. And lots of people will be really confused, and this will give you an opportunity for you to start to let them know that subluxation has been an ongoing thing, that our modern lifestyle actually has, happens from birth, many of us in the birth process, and we have layers of these stress built up from there as well. You'll begin to correct this layer of resistance, and it will really help you with your retention. All right, not retention, conversion as well. Folks, that's it for this episode. If you are confused about this, if you need some further support with this, then jump on over to the socials or respond to an email with me as well, and I can help to further clarify this for you. And in future episodes, perhaps I'll talk into the deeper layers of those other 6 or the other 5 there as well. Or if you want the deepest dive on them as well, come and join me inside of Community Influencer, because inside of that, we talk about those layers of resistance. We talk about what it looks like and the solutions for us to go through and troubleshoot all of those, as well as doing that in a way that's not pushy or sleazy, but it's just really eloquent, heart-centered conversations. Folks, as always, thanks for all that you do. Keep saving lives. Your community needs you to get this stuff sorted because it'll really help you to problem solve those objections by finding out what the actual problem is. And then the solution very often becomes self-evidence. See you soon. Self-evidence? Self-evident. All right. See you soon, folks. Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.